Hello and welcome to the Business podcast. I am your host, AJP John Paz from the Two Man Pouch. Of course, joining me is my co-host, the financial wrestling genius himself, Mr. Lavie Margolin. Lavie, how you doing today, sir?
Hey, John, I'm doing well. I'm going to mention something that isn't in the notes and that we didn't plan for, John. I just wanted to say thank you to you for all the years that you've worked with the Taskmaster. Unfortunately, of course, we all know the passing of Kevin Sullivan, and really loved the show from MLW through, of course, the Creative Control Network. It was like sitting at the learning tree, the tree of woe, every week. It made me really proud to be associated with this broad podcast network, like being one level away. So I've been, of course, enjoying the tributes and learning more about the business from you and Kevin Sullivan throughout the years.
Well, thank you. Thank you for saying that. Thank you for mentioning it. Yeah, R.I.P. Sully, my boy, my buddy, but man, a crazy 4 years basically of podcasting with him. So a lot of good times, a lot of good memories with Kevin. Awesome stuff.
Yeah, it seems like these things will go forever, but we have to appreciate the good times while they're here.
Yes, that is for sure. As far as what's going on in the business, where did you want to start? What did you want to do some GCW talk?
Yeah, so last time, breaking news while we were recording, there was a typhoon coming to Japan. I don't know how that affected Japan overall. Hopefully, everyone is well. But I do know that Effie and Joey Janela could not participate in the LA show, which ended up, I believe, being a sellout for GCW. Then the next day, they were in Salt Lake City in a smaller venue there, the Clubhouse, which looked like it was pretty slow initially in terms of ticket sales, but 3 rows reserved is basically what it could fit, and that ended up being sold. I'm not sure if that was officially a sellout. So I think I mentioned last time I thought it was the second or third time that they were there, but really it was the first time. But we had been talking about it for so long, so that I got confused. But really, one of the most interesting things is a little bit old, but I came across it and really enjoyed it as well. Was an interview that Ariel Helwani had done with Josh Barnett talking about Bloodsport. So it was confirmed. I don't think it was a secret, but it was confirmed that Bloodsport, if I'm using the words correctly, is co-owned between Josh Barnett and GCW. That Barnett, to get involved, he said that he needs to be the one that books it. And at least in the interview, Barnett was sort of like passing along sort of the elements about the business, how many people would have been at that show, that they were talking about the pre-WrestleMania show. And he said that Brett handles things like the attendance. So one interesting thing was that Joe Favorito, who is really a sports business expert, somebody that I follow for a while, he had an image from the American Dreams Mall tweeting out about the Harlow Trotters. And that looks like the space that GCW will use. I recognize that space. I think it's normally a hockey arena, where I think there's like minor league hockey that plays there, and that they've had I think it was arena football championship. So pretty cool space that they do there. As we're recording this, or actually not yet, but towards the end of the summer, of course, is going to be the homecoming shows in Atlantic City. The first night, which is usually stronger, has the fifth row. Most of those seats still available, so 4 rows deep, sold out. And the second night just has a few tickets in the second and third row, so plenty of tickets left in the fourth row. John, are you still considering going to those shows or one of those shows?
I'm definitely thinking about it. I might not have to wait till last minute like last time where it sells out before I'm able to go. I know that now from GCW. Can't get tickets at the door, or don't risk getting tickets at the door because they might sell out.
The first time that happened to me with wrestling was when the WWF got hot and used to go down like even Saturday night, like just go down on the box office and get some tickets. So I went with my father around, was it late, I guess early 98 and or maybe late, yeah, early 98, I would say. And Stone Cold was headlining, and they were like, "It's sold out." I was like, "It's sold out," not that there hadn't been right, like during during Diesel and Razor Ramon's, last shows that had sold out. I had my tickets in advance, but it just showed that the business is hot. So, not to make too much of this in terms of GCW selling out in Asbury Park, but sometimes you have to just plan these things early.
Yes, definitely. Feel like I don't know. Feel like they're sometimes due to sell out, but sometimes you don't see it coming. For some reason, I didn't see that one coming, but I should have. I should have been more aware. What else is going on in the GCW landscape?
So, just sort of looking ahead, at the end of this month is, of course, the show in Chicago, where I think generally we've seen that it's about 400 people. It's been reported in industry trade when it's sold out. So, there, the first row sold out, and some the box seating, which is very limited, is sold out. But second row has 6 or more tickets, which is the maximum of what you can look at. The show in Detroit has plenty of tickets from the fourth row on. That's along with some promotion with of course the Insane Clown Posse, and the show going back to Rochester looks like that will be an easy sellout. From the fifth row, just has a few tickets left, and then it's into GA. But looking at GCW's extensive announced schedule already, so like I mentioned, Homecoming night 1 and 2, August 24th and 25th, Chicago on the 31st of August, Detroit on September 14th, the following day in Rochester, then back to Harrah's, the Philadelphia area, on September 20th, Hartford the next day on the 21st, back to Atlantic City. So it feels like, I don't know, it hasn't been that hot a market, and they keep hitting it up. But October 12th and 13th in Atlantic City, then October 16th in Denver, back to LA, which is obviously working well for them, October 19th. Then the end of the month, San Diego, and then that brings them closer, not that close, but closer to Honolulu on November 2nd. Already announced Louisville on November 14th. Sauget, Illinois on the 15th, and the previously mentioned American Dream Mall show on November 23rd, so around Thanksgiving time.
What about Maple Leaf Wrestling? What's the latest on that?
So really cooking there in terms of Maple Leaf Wrestling. You'd think that they'd have the one show and then kind of go from there, but Scott D'Amore is really ready to rock, with Maple Leaf Wrestling. So first there was an article in the CBC. Legendary Canadian wrestling brand gets a reboot thanks to the former grappler, former TNA wrestling president Scott D'Amore to launch Maple Leaf Wrestling successor by Samir Chabra. For a professional wrestling promoter, D'Amore, childhood Saturdays in Windsor meant one thing: Maple Leaf Wrestling on cable television. It was what came through on Saturdays out of Hamilton. Every week, they took a match from one of the Maple Leaf Gardens house shows, live events, and they showed it on TV. And the only place you got to see that was on Maple Leaf. D'Amore's love for Maple Leaf Wrestling and pro wrestling in general eventually led him to enter the industry as a performer, as we know. D'Amore, 50, has secured the rights to the footage that remains of Maple Leaf Wrestling broadcast and has relaunched the brand under a new, albeit similar name, Maple Leaf Pro Wrestling. I think that's like just my aside. I think that's like pretty amazing that, you know, there was this whole nother catalog, which, you know, you can have these different shows from Maple Leaf Gardens, depending on the promotion that basically the Tunnies were working with. And this can launch your YouTube followers and social media, where you can sort of like grease the wheels and get people that are into the old footage, and then you can really promote them the new footage. So it's not completely unique tack, but that really helps to get footing. D'Amore plans on releasing archived matches while also hosting new wrestling events. He plans to broadcast archival matches through online platforms like YouTube and Facebook, while once again hosting live matches, beginning with 2 events scheduled for late October. D'Amore watched the promotion in the 70s and 80s. Okay, so there's the history. To the unwilling, he would run competing shows in the market and try to run you out of business, meaning the WWF. By a time frame, okay, so a little bit of history. I want to focus more on the now. Okay, so, okay. D'Amore says his goal for Maple Leaf Wrestling is multifold. While the promotion will honor the legacy of the past with archives of classic matches and broadcasts, D'Amore also wants to make sure Canadian pro wrestlers get a chance to show their skills. Canadian talent has to work twice as hard, 3 times as hard as U.S. talent. I think we can give that platform for Canadian talent to go out there and compete with the best in the world and show how good they are. Like, I think that's a great strategy. Just focus on like Canada, and they're bringing in talent like that. So really good article. I suggest that people go out and check that out. In addition to that, they announced a relationship which crosses over into multiple continents. So first of all, our friend from Oceania Pro Wrestling from Australia, as well as when we don't approach, where at least I don't know anyone there, Qatar Pro Wrestling, although I've tried to find their information to invite them to the show. They formed this alliance called the Pro Wrestling Alliance. We'll work together on talent exchanges, champion versus champion, and other collaboration. Begins on September 22nd when QPW champion Classy Ali defends his title in an already loaded OPW event in Melbourne, Australia. Then October 19th, QPW and OPW talent will be on deck as Maple Leaf emanates from Windsor with back-to-back pay-per-view events that will stream worldwide. The promotion forged an alliance of 3 of the most experienced and well-respected wrestling minds in the industry. MLW Scott D'Amore has, okay, we know about him. QPW chairman Ali Al-Marafi has 5 years experience in pro wrestling. And Cam Val, like I mentioned, our friend, former guest of the show, managing director of OPW, has vast experience as sports executive. This reminds me, especially as they're doing it so young, when Jeff Jarrett was announcing like all these different relationships for Global Force Wrestling. I'm not trying to dim it, but it just reminded me of that, you know, when they haven't run a show first. And Scott D'Amore's tweet, just to emphasize sort of like where they are as promotion, one of the goals is to showcase the best Canadian talent in the world. ELP's body of work in New Japan has proven that it's exactly that. So just talking about one of the talents announced. Excited to have the Canadian superstar. So they've been naming a lot of talent that's attached elsewhere for this loaded show in his favorite venue in Windsor.
We do have a special guest joining us right now, Michael from Limitless Wrestling. Michael, what's going on? How you doing? Welcome back.
Doing great. How is everyone doing today?
Very good, very good. How was AEW?
It was a solid. It was a good show. The runover was Strickland and Dragon. I really only wanted to stick around to see if Nigel had any interaction with Danielson because of all the trash he's been talking. But of course, as soon as Dragon came out, he bailed from the ring. So keeping them apart still.
Man, crazy. I would love to see that rematch. Many years in the making, but I'd love to see the Danielson-Nigel rematch.
I know. We got the tease last year where it was allegedly supposed to be at Wembley.
Yep.
Nigel even posted himself a photos of himself in his gear on his social media when Dragon was injured and couldn't compete after the show. So I thought, well, we'll get it this year, but they're obviously going with the title match. I'd still like to see it.
Me too.
Yeah.
For sure.
Yeah, I just watched Nigel's documentary he did, Last in the McGinnis, the other day again, because I stumbled across it. I had it still. And it's a really, really good look at the last days of his wrestling. And it's almost kind of sad that it ended the way it did, quite frankly. So,
man, one of the best. I loved him. A huge ROH fan of his. Just following him all the way through ROH. He was awesome. There's no doubt about it. But let's talk a little bit about Limitless. What's going on? You got another book, the Almanac, if you will. What's going on with Limitless?
yeah. So this year's book, my follow up from the one from it took me 3 years. Life happens sometimes, but anyways, I went with a kind of an homage to the old Pro Wrestling Illustrated almanacs I used to look forward to every year. That PWI did. I don't know if you guys ever read those, if you're familiar with them or not, but I was just that's something I look forward to on the newsstands every year, and so that's kind of the approach I went with it. I took all the bios out, biographies that I had in it from the last time. I think what really helped with the first book was it was pandemic. There was no wrestling for like almost a year. So I had plenty of time to work on it without new stuff happening. So this one's just to focus on all the results to the shows, all the facts and the behind the scenes, people that were originally booked and had to cancel or had flight issues or last minute changes, any goings on that happened at the show or after the show. And then, I did a by the numbers section where it breaks down year by year, how many matches, venues they wrestled at, if they did TV shows or not. Plus we looked at Let's Wrestle, which is like their minor league, I guess, if you want to call it, or it's their NXT, the complete Let's Wrestle results from their beginning to I think I went to May of this year for both Limitless and Let's Wrestle. It's a huge passion project for me. And I've it's pretty fairly well received at the live shows that I've had, the two I've had it at.
What do you think is the decision to publish another book about Limitless? Do you feel like wasn't enough the first one, or do you feel like it definitely needed?
Well, I mean, so to me, it's the history of the promotion. So like it's been 3 years since the last book, the first book. So it's just, and that's why it's the first book was pretty near 500 pages. This one's just about 200. And that's again, because I cut the biographies out, but it's just continuing that history of each show, what happened, the full results on it. Like it's just, to me, like I find that interesting, and apparently the fans of Limitless find it interesting. It really had to do with Mark Sterling, actually, because he talked about, he bought the first book and he talked about it on the Wrestling Figures podcast, where he said that he loved it because it was the complete history of this promotion. And he wished that they had something like this for Create a Pro. And I've had other promoters talk to me about it because they wish they had a history like this of their promotion, from the beginning to current. And so that was kind of what led me to keep plugging away with it. And that's why I went with like this smaller almanac approach. And I don't know if I'll do it annually or like every couple of years. We'll see what happens, I guess. But so far, I mean, people are digging it. I've sold several at the two shows we had. The big show this past weekend, I mean, I had sold 24 at the first show in Yarmouth in July. I sold another 20 at the big show at the Lewiston Armory with just over 1,200 people there for that one. So if people like it and they want to keep picking it up, I'll keep making them.
Awesome. They get continued success there. That's awesome. They obviously, people are loving them. That's very, very cool. So as far as the almanac, basically, like you said, it's a couple of years after the first book. What in the business has changed for wrestling? What in Limitless business has changed in those 3 years?
Well, I mean, I think pretty much everyone coming out of the pandemic kind of suffered. Like Limitless is a lot of their top stars that were bringing the people in before the pandemic got signed off by, AEW or they were in NXT for a while. And they kind of lost, I'm not going to say lost their fan base, but they really had to rebuild. So it's been a big rebuilding process the last few years for Limitless, building some new stars and trying to rebuild the fan base that kind of diminished because of the pandemic. I mean, I know a lot of people, even when the show started back up, they were still hesitant to go out. They were still hesitant to go into a crowd, to be in a large area with people. And that kept a lot of the fans away up here. And now as time gone on, it's built up, and geez, almost every show this year, they sold out in Yarmouth, I think, which is what kind of helped push towards trying to do that big show at the Lewiston, at the Coliseum in Lewiston. And watching those ticket sales click away week after week, as you go online and actually see the seating chart and see more and more seats gone. And, to have over thousands ticket pre-sale, that's pretty significant. And then another couple hundred walk-up day of the show. I mean, it's a pretty significant grab for Limitless. And hopefully the Coliseum will want to have him back next year for next year's VLC.
I know Lavie's got some good questions for you about not only Limitless, but the book as well.
Okay.
Yes. So, Michael, you got things off to a good start, because my piece was going to be like a case study of this Coliseum show. So we're on the right track here. We really needed you here because John and I have been talking about this show since it was announced. But to me, at least, like, Maine is like, where I went with my family when I was a kid. I don't understand the market. I need to understand the market. All that sort of stuff. So it's more abstract, right? So first, take us back a little bit. So sorry, Michael, I think it gets a little bit confusing because I think because you represent the Limitless brand, sometimes we think that you work for Limitless, but really you are a big fan of Limitless that has great relations, and you could use their name on the book and sell your book at shows, but you're basically like their number one fan. Is that fair?
Yeah, I don't work for Randy or Limitless. I help out with merch sometimes or whatever, but I want to support the product. So I buy my ticket every time. I want to, and I like to sit front row because I'm a huge fan. I'm a wrestling fan first. So the first book was the first book came about because it was the pandemic. There wasn't a lot of wrestling. I have a blog I like to post on, and someone had asked me who I thought had the most wins in Limitless Wrestling. And of course I got curious, and this led me down this enormous rabbit hole where I started making a spreadsheet, going through every show, writing down wins and losses, just so I could have just stuff to post to my blog for my own fun, my own interest. And that's what spawned from the first book, because I compiled all this data and it just felt like I had to do something with it. And Randy loved it, absolutely loved it, of course. And then since then, I'm a rabid fan. Good friends with Randy and a lot of the wrestlers that work at the shows and everyone else that's involved. So the book's become a passion project for me as far as continuing on with the next one. But yeah, no, I don't work there. I'm just a huge fan. I get a little perks. I can ask for, tickets went on sale today for the anniversary show, September 21st. And front row sold out like that. But I can message Randy and say, can you hold me a front row ticket? And I don't have to worry about 7:00 and making sure I'm on there to buy a ticket like that. That's my perk.
Sure. To be a little nosy, does Randy charge you for a table to sell your books, or I'm assuming that you just get that? Okay.
No. So his family runs the merch table, and they just leave me a small spot. And I just set my stuff down and I go watch the show. And if someone buys a book while the show's going on, they just hold the money for me and give it to me when I'm done. No, it's a real family atmosphere, real family environment. Again, I buy my ticket because I want to support Limitless Wrestling, because I'm selfish. I want it to succeed. So I have good wrestling to go to, because like you said, the main wrestling market was not good prior to Limitless Wrestling. It was carny, quote unquote, if you will. I mean, you'd go to a show, you'd spend $10. If you got one good match, you were lucky. It didn't have a great reputation for the longest time until Randy brought Limitless in, and then the reputation grew and grew and grew. And he likes to say it was Unreal, the Cody Rhodes show at the Westbrook Armory. That's what skyrocketed Limitless. And I actually tend to disagree. I think it was a year prior when he had Zack Sabre Jr. versus Chris Hero on the night of a blizzard in Orono, Maine at the American Legion Hall. I paid $12 to sit front row and watch them wrestle for 30 minutes and just put on a clinic and entertain the 170 people that were there. Like that, to me, that is what launched Limitless. To me.
So we got to this peak thus far of this Coliseum show. So let's take a step back a little bit, a few months. So when did you first hear things were in the works? What were your thoughts when the show was announced? Are you like, okay, is this is going to be a great next step? Is this taking on too much? Like, how did this word start disseminating to you?
So we heard some scuttlebutt of a big show back in, I want to say, March. He kept it under wraps very well, but like some of the guys were talking because they'd heard things, and I didn't know if he meant the Expo again, because if you remember in 2019 they ran the Expo, which is a historic venue in Maine for professional wrestling. That's where WWF ran all their shows for the longest time before the Cumberland County Civic Center was built in '77. And he drew 857 to the Expo back then, and that was the MJF Anthony Green headlining show, and that was when MJF was doing very well for himself on his way through to AEW and whatnot. So we didn't know if it was going to be the Expo again or where it was going to be. And then I heard rumors of Lewiston. So I thought maybe the Lewiston Armory, because that's a fairly good sized venue. And I think AWA actually ran there back in the 86. But then it was the Coliseum, and only WWF and Ring of Honor ran the Coliseum. They ran 3 shows between the two promotions. And Ring of Honor did a full, like a 3/4 arena, and they only drew like 800 people. And that was in end of 2018 when wrestling was a pretty big boon, and Ring of Honor was doing very well then because they had the Young Bucks and Paige and Cody as before they all left to go do AEW. So, I wasn't sure what he was thinking or what was going to happen. But then when they announced the Coliseum, I was like, oh, here we go. Let's see what happens. I know the Yarmouth had been selling out for quite a while, but that's 4 1/4 roughly, depending on standing room. And the layout for the Coliseum was like 1,300, I think, when they first posted it. But they went with half house, which I think is smart because they do MMA fighting at the Coliseum. They typically do half house there. And I guess that's what the Coliseum did, is when they had their fights there and Randy went down to see the setup because that's how it was going to be similar. And I guess that might have been one of the deciding points where they went for it. And the Coliseum, quite frankly, really, they wanted it. They wanted to have wrestling there. They wanted someone to come back. And so with WWE not showing up and no one else, they sought the biggest wrestling promotion in Maine and said, let's do something. And it was awesome. The atmosphere was tremendous. The fans were tremendous. Like it was awesome.
So I need a little bit of on the ground knowledge. So Lewiston, is that a town that swells with like summer vacationers? Is there an advantage to like doing it in the summer? Or is it locals? Is there like a big difference in the population that you can draw from at that time of year?
So Lewiston is an old French town or city. I would not consider it a tourist destination personally. Growing up in Maine my whole life, not all due respect, we call it Dirty Lou for a reason, because it's just it's not a destination for me, and I'm not sure it's a destination for too many people, to be frank. The biggest draw they ever had every year was the Great Falls Balloon Festival. And that actually didn't happen this year for whatever reason, but another group decided to run the Balloon Festival, which was the same weekend that Limitless ran VLC. I'm not saying that had any bearing on Limitless drawing, because I didn't even know that this other Balloon Festival was happening till I went to pick my buddy up who lives in Auburn to go over to the venue. And I was like, oh, the Balloon Festival's going on. So like, it was not that advertised. But no, Lewiston is it's not a destination town, really, in my opinion. as a mainer, like Portland more is, or even Bangor, but not Lewiston.
So if it didn't draw, he could always blame the balloons, right?
Yeah, I guess. But Lewiston is the biggest thing that's ever happened in Lewiston was Muhammad Ali knocked out Sonny Liston to win the world title when no one else would run the show there. And it happened at the same venue. They called it the Central Maine Civic Center then, but it's now called the Coliseum. That's where that famous match happened, that very famous photo of Muhammad Ali telling Sonny Liston to get up. That was right in Lewiston. So that's Lewiston's biggest claim to fame, is the world title changed hands there.
Yeah, that kept coming up as I was doing my extensive research into the venue. Now, you mentioned Yarmouth. Sorry for my pronunciation.
Right.
Is that close enough that Limitless could be like, okay, well, we're doing 450 there, so like, in worst case scenario, we can get most of those people to come over here? Or is that like a different like market?
No, Yarmouth. Sorry, I'm from Maine. Yarmouth is 30 minutes from Lewiston. If you're coming up north, if you're coming up from out of state, you're going to hit where the 295 and 95 split. You can take 295 up to Yarmouth. You can take 95 and go to Lewiston instead. So, I mean, it's not that far apart from each other. So they're similar market locations. Lewiston's just a little bit farther up north.
So I have like Google News alerts and all that sort of stuff. So like when the show was first announced, there was a couple of articles where it was like, hey, unique show, Coliseum, it's something special and whatever. Then at least what was coming across to me, it was quiet until like maybe Thursday before the show. Then I started seeing like the local articles started picking up. I think there's like radio DJs that like there was like constant promotion for those few days. Like what were you seeing? Was there something in the middle that I just wasn't seeing, or was it really that like promotion at the very beginning and then like a big pop sort of towards the end?
I think outside of Limitless's social medias pushing that they were doing, and then obviously every show they hyped up the upcoming show at the previous shows and whatnot. Yeah, you're right. The big real push came at the end when the Sun Journal, which is the local paper in Lewiston, started doing articles on like Golden Boy Bobby Robinson and Dango and just everything as a whole. And then News Center 6, a Portland news station, also did a news article on it that last week. 2 weeks prior to the show, I think there was only one floor seat that was left, because I was, for my own person, like my friends and I we're chatting about it. I'm going online to the Coliseum's website and I'm looking at tickets, and you can literally see, on the layout what seats are left, and I'd have to dig back through a chat, but I mean, I think over a week prior to the show, there was over 800 tickets sold, almost 900. So it was doing well with its social media promotion, with local promotion. But you're right. I didn't see a big, like, larger push until the final weeks leading up to it.
Yeah, if you need some of those screenshots, I was right behind you, obsessing over it. Yeah, and I had about the same thing. Like, I think the floor was 400, and then you had to figure out in the upper deck, like which ones was actually for sale and which ones hadn't been. So I had it just under 800, maybe like 775, like a few days out, and then suddenly it was like Friday was popping, and then the ticket map was still open into the show, so that's when I got like the final count. Well, not a final count, but I actually want to go over with you your potential estimates. I think you had tweeted out over 1,000. We don't have to sleuth this like WrestleMania 3, right?
Yeah, no.
But I had seen like over 1,000. What was that? Cage Match had it like 1,200. One of the workers had it 1,500. What do you think's like? Where does this land?
So I asked one of the people that work there what the count was, and he told me it was 1,050 pre-sale before the morning of the show. And I had asked how that compared to Ring of Honor, and he told me he'd have to go back and dig through the old records, but he has it somewhere. And I've emailed him because I'm like, I want to know for my own personal well-being. I was at Ring of Honor. I'm thinking like 800. I asked my buddy Ben. He also threw out the number 800, like uninitiated. I asked Anthony Green, who was the first person to wrestle on the Ring of Honor show in Maine, and he also thought like 800. So like we all were looking at 800 people from our vantage points there as fans and workers in 2018 for Ring of Honor, and we were hoping Limitless would do better. I say 1,200. I think that's a safe estimate because that the place was packed, and I stand at the merchandise table a lot because that's where I sell my book, and I have never seen so much Limitless merchandise go so fast. Like they had their normal full table of regular stuff, and then he had made up I have no idea 100 t-shirts for the VLC that are specific, the event specific shirts from sizes small to 5X, and there was one shirt left at the end of the show, a medium. And then the rest of their merchandise they brought, hats, their t-shirts, posters, pins, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. That table is wiped out. Like I couldn't believe how much merch they sold. And then Dijak's line never stopped. It seemed like Scotty Too Hotty didn't come out to the end of the show, but he was there for an hour after the show was over, still doing stuff when I left. Anthony Green did well. I mean, everyone that was out, Tony Atlas did well. So everyone on the gimmick table side of things, they all did extremely well. The venue was gorgeous. I'm like, to me, the guardrails, that isn't independent wrestling to me because I'm not used to that on indie wrestling in Maine, but it worked for me that night. I don't know. It's just the setup was great. The fans were great. Everyone seemed happy. No one was miserable. You know what I mean? Like there's no it was a great atmosphere, great environment. The wrestlers all worked really, really hard. I can't say enough good about Ricky Smokes and Aaron Rourke and their match they had that night. It's their fourth singles match. They always kill it when they get in the ring together, and like everyone stepped it up that night because the atmosphere and the size of the crowd and everything.
So Tony Atlas, was it sort of like a nod back, like, hey, Maine wrestling, like how could we not book Tony? Like, has he been on Limitless shows before?
No, this whole show was a love letter to professional wrestling in Maine, quite frankly. With the main event of Westbrook's own Scott Taylor, Scotty Too Hotty, like the first Maine wrestler that made it to the WWF, wrestling Dirty Dango or Johnny Curtis as I knew him back in the EWA days. To them, the second guy that really made it big in the WWF from Maine. Tony Atlas, who's not from Maine, but he's lived in Lewiston since the late 80s. He's never been, this is his first time ever being on a Limitless show. He's still working up here for NAWA on the regular, on the fair circuits. And then like even Golden Boy Bobby Robinson or Luke Robinson, as he went by on Tough Enough. He's from Auburn, Maine. And, he hasn't wrestled since 2017, I want to say. And he was on the show. So, I mean, it really was like kind of a love letter to Maine wrestling, a celebration of it, but maybe that's Scott Taylor's last match. Who knows? Might be his last match in Maine. He hasn't wrestled since January of this year. And I think he only wrestled a couple matches last year. So
we have all these good feelings about it, but yeah. I was surprised to come across a couple months ago that the current owners are looking to sell this place for about $4.5 million. Have you seen those articles?
The Coliseum?
Yeah.
Oh, no, I didn't know that. I hadn't seen that.
Yeah, so I could just read, not to belabor it, but I'll just read a snippet. Lewiston Coliseum, which was the setting for one of the most famous scenes in the sport's history, is for sale. The Coliseum is a 3,000-seat arena, depending on how you set it up, 54,000 square feet. Okay. The property is being listed by SVN with a list price of $4.9 million. The listing requires a deposit of $50,000. The building is currently home of the Maine Nordiques. The 5-year lease with the Nordiques started on 2023. The total value of the lease is almost $4 million. There's parking for $500,000. The current owner also says damage caused to the roof by, the storm in January 2024 has been repaired, and the insurance company will cover the cost of replacing the roof and painting the inside ceiling. So it could be a totally different story, with a different owner, just when you kind of start building something.
Yeah. No, that's true. I mean, someone else could buy it and want to do something completely different with it. I don't think it's been like earmarked as a historic landmark. So I mean, they could buy it, level it, put in condominiums, or do whatever they want. Probably. I hope not.
So, although we don't talk a lot of I mean, we actually did talk a little bit of AEW. We don't talk a lot of AEW on this show, but like, to me, it's upsetting that they keep booking like 20,000 seat venues and then have like 2,700 people there. Like, do you think this would be like a good venue for AEW to have like Dynamite?
I think AEW might be better off in Portland I think they call it the Cross Insurance Arena now, or even the Augusta Civic Center. I mean, I went to the shows at the Agganis Arena that they did, and I went to TD Garden for the Blood and Guts, and I went to Worcester for the show, the first one they did at the DCU Center. And to me, like, Agganis Arena size wise is comparable to maybe Portland or even the Bangor venue or Augusta. But those venues don't have the same, like Augusta especially. It's an older venue, so it doesn't have like the extras, I guess you would say, like the LEDs that go around the arena and things of that nature. It's more of a basic arena. I know WWE did house shows at this venue, the Coliseum, in 2005 and in 2015, and they drew well. So, I mean, would I love to see AEW in Maine? Yeah, absolutely. But I see Portland as being where they would go over this venue here in Lewiston.
So, last question for me before I turn over to John. Talking Tony Atlas, late 80s, you're a fan a long time. Did you ever go to ICW, IWCCW shows?
I did not. I went to a lot of so the Savoldis promoted those, and I would watch them. They were on my local channel, so I would watch them on my local channel here. And I do have a lot of the results from shows they did around Maine, Lewiston, South China, Presque Isle, et cetera, et cetera. I went to my first time really seeing Tony Atlas live was EWA when they launched in '97. And then he ran his own promotion up here, a few shows. But I went to a lot of the NW on Fire with the Savoldis. So I did watch a lot of the ICW and IWCCW on TV, but I never was lucky enough to go to one of those shows live. I'm not that old.
I have a joke. Did you ever see the Vic Steamboat Tony Atlas match? Because they would replay it every other week.
Oh yeah, geez, like yes, I saw that numerous times.
John?
So where can everybody find you, follow you, and most importantly, get your book?
Well, the book is on Amazon because that's who I use for publishing. So if you'd like to pick it up there, you're more than welcome to. If you'd like to buy a copy from me direct, I'm on socials. It's Superstar ML on X or Instagram. I'm on Facebook. If you can find me there, it's just Michael Labbe. But yeah, if you want to get it from me, I can sign it and throw it in the mail for you, or you can come pick it up at live Limitless Wrestling show.
What's the official title when they're looking on Amazon? Is it the Limitless Almanac?
Is it? I think it's the Limitless Wrestling Almanac. Yeah, I don't think the 2024 is at the beginning of the title on Amazon.
All right. Everybody should get out there and check that out as Limitless is taking over Maine. There's no doubt about that. But Michael, thank you so much for all the time.
Thank you very much for having me. I appreciate it.
Thanks. Take care.
Thank you, Michael. All right, Lavie, finishing off the news, let's talk about MLW. What's going on? What's the latest with MLW?
Yeah, so not too much new, but just checking in because it's been a little bit of a while. August 29th in New York, in Queens, New York, Summer of the Beast, the smaller venue in Melrose Ballroom. Most of the reserve tickets are now gone, a few singles, so that should be a sellout, even with standing room. Center Stage in Atlanta, September 14th. Plenty of tickets left beyond the closest tickets to the ring. In Florida on St. Petersburg on October 4th. Let's see. A little bit, maybe one ticket in the 2-3 tickets in the front row, some of the second row left, and a fair amount of the third row and beyond still remaining there. And then They'll have in Cicero and Lucha Apocalypse. They still have a while on November 9th. So looking, especially Atlanta and Chicago area, looking for some past results that strong attendances.
What about Wow? I see that they've got shows coming up with tickets available.
Yeah, so this was, for some reason, I thought it happened already earlier, but they have these multi-day shows in California, which we talked about, the Chamber of Commerce supporting it and so on. So when you interesting and a good way sort of like to maximize from your most passionate fans, which we'll talk about for TNA as well. The VIP tickets seem to be going well, so you have the opportunity to talk to the WoW superheroes for $175.
Oh my goodness gracious! What about TNA? I feel like they've got a lot of shows coming up.
So I never noticed this before, John. You'll let me know if you have, but the Bound for Glory shows, I think it's smart. We always talk about like the most passionate TNA fans, and they're kind of doing a little bit of the WWE model where first and second row are really expensive, but then you get the meet and greets, you get to keep the chair and so on. So front row, and this is for, I think these are both for both nights. So, a little bit of a saving in that way, but $599 for the first row, front row, and $499 for the second row. What else is going on for TNA in September in San Antonio? They're teaming up with the local ABC affiliate for ticket giveaways, so smart way for promotion. In Louisville, the first night at the end of the month, most of the reserve tickets in a modest sellout are gone. The second night, of course, more tickets are still available. For their Victory Road show, it's not an open map, but when I clicked into a couple of the sections, it looked like most of the first and second row, maybe the third row, depending on where you are, those tickets are gone. In Spartanburg, the old Memorial Auditorium, so in a very modest setup for late September, so a little bit of time. Most of the tickets still remain there, so just looking at their schedule to review upcoming. So end of the month, Louisville double shot. Middle of September, San Antonio double shot. End of September, Spartanburg double shot. October 26th, Detroit. November 8th and 9th, Fayetteville. November 29th, Winston-Salem. And then tickets not yet on sale, but then the end of the year, Atlanta.
What about Memphis wrestling? What's the latest with Memphis?
So in a bit of a surprise, and I think this is a really, really smart move, that Jonathan Gresham joins Memphis Wrestling as a full-time competitor and mentor. So trainer, all that sort of stuff. So not going to read the whole press release, but of course, already paying benefits with Jordan Grace appearing on the show as well this week. So really a smart way to distinguish the promotion with one of the top independent superstars, and of course Jordan Grace from TNA coming along, of course as a couple when her schedule allows to. So really a smart win for Memphis as we start seeing their syndication expand as well through the Championship Wrestling, which is really gravy. I think their bread and butter is their training center, selling tickets locally, sold shows in the Memphis market, all of that sort of stuff on the ground. Of course, Dustin Starr, one of our first guests a few years ago on the podcast.
What's going on with Masked Republic? Our buddies over at Masked Republic.
Yes, our friends over there. So Burt Ogden Arena has set up a 4 for $80 special. So pretty big venue. Smart move. Get the whole family there. Looks like a fun show. I don't want to be overly critical of our friends there. Too much of a spotlight, but we have to be fair. So I'm looking, as we look at ticket maps, doesn't look like a lot of tickets sold so far. It's just a few weeks out. I haven't done a hand count, so I don't want to be overly analytical, but something certainly to watch. I think this is a showcase for them as they work with new partners, and certainly would look to expand something like this. So I don't know what the expectations are in terms of tickets sold, or just, how the presentation goes, getting a little bit of rhythm going. It's hard. You really have to be on the ground for Lucha and connect, find that audience and connect with the audience. They're doing some interesting stuff like that authentic Arena Mexico feel, if you can't get to Arena Mexico, certainly here in the States. So looking forward to seeing how this ticket promotion goes.
Now, what is the latest on Triller? Is there some sort of controversy going on with Triller?
So I want to be careful here. I kind of turned it how you do in Triller, because there are certain signs that concern me a little bit, but I can't pass judgment to say, like, this is, what's going to happen, or this is what I feel will happen, and so on. But I think as there's such an important part, not only to the combat sports landscape, but pro wrestling landscape, certainly they've expanded their relationship with AEW. Recently, things are moving along with GCW, so things look positive, but sort of like when you look a little bit under the surface, I have questions. So what am I talking about? So White Diamond Research, so these are not my words, this is White Diamond Research, issued a new research note on AGBA Group, saying, of course, we know that they're looking to merge with Triller, saying that the $4 billion valuation for the merger between the company and social media company Triller is a made-up number that is far from reality. Before the merger announcement, White Diamond alleges that Triller and AGBA were both failed, almost bankrupt companies with little to no value, and argues that there is no logical business reason for AGBA and Triller to merge, as they are in different sectors with zero synergies, and both have proven incompetent management. Not my words, I'm just reading the article. Further, White Diamond claims that AGBA's deal with predatory lender Yorkville has terrible terms for its investors. Then, as AGBA is already a public company, they had a 10Q recently. So this was interesting to see promissory notes receivable from Triller. In connection with the first and second prepaid advances issued by Yorkville under A&R SEPA and the second A&R SEPA, Yorkville advanced $8 million to Triller, and Triller issued promissory notes to the company on April 25th, 2024. The promissory notes receivable from Triller included interest receivables from Triller. Subsequently, in July and August, the company further advanced an aggregate amount of $15.7 million to Triller for its business operation purposes. So almost $26 million over the last several months, or I guess within 2024, is going from Yorkville to Triller to fund business operations. Right? So sometimes I don't know exactly what that's being for. Sometimes one could speculate, right, that Triller is going through cash and needs it to keep things running, right? But that's just speculation. But there's been some turnover in any company. There's turnover, but there's been some notable turnover at Triller. Prem Parameswaran, the former president and CFO, has left. But more connected to us in the show, neither is a public figure, so I'm not going to name them. But Chief Marketing Officer has left the company after having been there a number of years. And our PR connection, who I believe was there part-time, but was Triller Fights PR person, their email bounced back, and I got to see that they're no longer at the company. So that was curious. One of the things that we didn't talk much about, because it seemed up in the air, was in July, Isaac Rodriguez of VXS said, "It's been months since our last show, and promotions who make your platform thrive are still waiting on payments. We're constantly giving runarounds around zero support from the team. Some people depend on iPay-per-view revenue. This is not okay. And it's not just VXS. I've confirmed with multiple promoters about not receiving any form of payout since January. This is why companies are moving away to build their own platform. I feel insulted as a longtime creator, user, and hope all creators are eventually taken care of." And then when you search, if you search Triller payment, right? This goes back to their versus section with rappers and different people complaining about late payments. So added together, this is concerning when so many pro wrestling promotions rely on Triller. So there's this merger up in the air, late payments throughout the year. So just looking at public information, it's just question marks, things to look at without passing any final judgment on it.
And finally, Burning Man. What the heck? What's going on with Burning Man of all things?
So maybe next time, depending on the news, we could do a more in-depth look at this. But NPR covered it, and then I think New York Times and some other outlets. So Burning Man, it's not for me going to the desert or whatever, but it tends to be a pretty hot ticket. But for this year, it didn't sell out in advance. So it's that it's either gotten more expensive than it's always been. And John, I don't know if you have friends that are experiencing this. I'm seeing this with some. I work in career services and so on. Some of the students I worked with years ago, tech is not doing well, and a lot of upwardly mobile people were doing really well in tech, and they had money to spend, and we were starting that with concert tickets and so on. So that might be a tightness in the market. So what does this have to do with pro wrestling? As we've noticed, especially with WWE, they've been focusing more on like premium tickets, special events, fly-ins, and so on. So are we starting to see an economy where people don't have the type of money to spend that they once did? And, smartly, like La Lucha event that we just talked about, family of four, $80, you don't really see that with WWE anymore. So might we see sort of a comeuppance, in terms of ticket sale success?
Oh, interesting. I was wondering the Burning Man tie-in there. Very, very interesting. But let's wrap this
Hopefully we'll
bad
talk about it
boy
a little
up.
bit more.
Yeah, we'll talk about it definitely more in the future. But let's wrap this bad boy up and hit the plugs. You follow me on Twitter and Instagram at 2Man Power Trip. Lavie, what do you got going on?
Yeah, check us out on LinkedIn, right? The Business of the Business. Follow me on X, Lavie Marg, Lavie Marg, and check out some of my long-form articles and book reviews on LionCupJobSearch.com.
All right. Thank you, everybody out there, for tuning in. See you right back here next week for a little business of the business.